It is November 4th, 2023. We're going to be doing, I guess, maybe a split show today. So we'll do something here in the morning and then probably something later at night. So this one we're going to go over there's still futile attempts at trying to wedge a square peg in a round hole. This doesn't fit, and that is that 14th Amendment, Section 3, does not apply to the office of the presidency, and the oath of office that he took does not require support of the Constitution. It is to protect and defend the Constitution. So we're going to go over that. She brings on this guy Ludwig, so we might have to adjust the speed because this guy's a slow talker, to talk about how just seriously this totally applies and not at all beating a dead horse, as I put it in the titles. So here we go.
Does the historical record, what if anything, does the historical record tell us about whether Section 3 was limited to the events of the Civil War or not?
It was not limited to the events of the Civil War, and we know that because first, the language was general. It just referred to insurrection or rebellion. And secondly, there were senators in the debate that made pointedly clear that they thought it also should apply to any future insurrection that might occur.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. In courtrooms all across our country this week, questions about insurrection and January 6th and the law are being litigated, determining whether inciting the Capitol insurrection disqualifies Donald Trump from ever running for office again. At issue, whether the ex-president violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which reads, quote, "No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office having previously taken an oath."
You're forgetting a lot of shit in there, but okay.
"To support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof." Legal challenges based on this theory have been mounted in many states as the 2024 presidential primaries inch ever closer. This week, we saw a week-long hearing in Colorado. We've covered it on this show, where a judge heard testimony from constitutional experts, like the clip we just played you. Also heard from Capitol Police officers, members of Congress, and former Trump administration officials. The judge there said she will make a decision by Thanksgiving. State Supreme Court justices in Minnesota heard arguments yesterday over Donald Trump's eligibility. They were skeptical that states have the authority to take Trump off the ballot. This week, we also saw the former president sue Jocelyn Benson. She's, of course, familiar to viewers of this show. She's the Secretary of State of Michigan, where another 14th Amendment challenge has been filed. That suit seeks to ask a state court to block Secretary Benson from keeping Trump's name off the ballot. But for conservative former federal judge Michael Luttig, the answer's crystal clear on the law. Trump disqualified himself. Luttig and constitutional law scholar Lawrence Tribe wrote in a joint piece in The Atlantic over the summer this, quote, "The former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and the resulting attack on the U.S. Capitol place him squarely within the ambit of the disqualification clause, and he is therefore ineligible to serve as president ever again." The most pressing constitutional question facing our democracy at this moment, then, is whether we will abide by this clear command of the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause. Here's what Judge Luttig told me last time he was on this program.
If there's one thing that I could tell the country and today, it would be that the effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election was not and is not politics.
Then why are the mechanisms there? If you don't like the mechanisms, talk about the mechanisms. 100% Pence had the ability to do that. He chose not to do that. They had to remove the ability to do that, at least as far as the electors and counting them and which ones would count. I mean, this is not hard.
This is, as we now know from the indictments of the former president by the Department of Justice and Jack Smith, these were grave crimes against the United States of America, perhaps almost as grave as would have been treason.
And he's back. It's where we start the hour with former federal judge Michael Luttig and former acting U.S. Solicitor General Neil Katyal. We'll get to your pairing up and partnering up in a minute before we let either of you go. But I want to start with your thoughts on what's happening this week in courtrooms around the country. All that seems to have been put in motion by the argument you started making publicly this summer.
Thank
You mean desperate argument?
you, Nicole, for having me with you this afternoon. It's a real pleasure. The proceedings and the hearings that are going on across the country this week, next week, and the weeks that follow are going to address, as Professor Tribe and I said, literally the most pressing constitutional issue of our times, and that is whether, under the Constitution of the United States of America, is Donald Trump disqualified from holding the office of the presidency again as a result and as a consequence of his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The question under the Constitution, and we're talking now about the 14th Amendment, Section 3, as you read, is whether or not the former president engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the United States Constitution.
No, it should be against the United States government, which is ultimately, I guess, but trying to say that it's against the Constitution, well, it's not against the Constitution if all the mechanisms that he had were using were under the law. Alternative slates of electors are in there. It's been used. There's precedent in law.
The question is not whether he engaged in an insurrection.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's the question that you've been posing. So what? Now now the entire reason for your article and starting all this bullshit, you're saying is no longer the real premise?
Or rebellion against the United States of America or the authority of the United States of America. That's the issue that's at stake. That's the issue that will eventually have to be decided by the Supreme Court of the United States.
Do you see any one of these cases as being the one that gets to the Supreme Court?
Well, Professor Tribe and I have followed and monitored the various state and federal court proceedings that are underway in several of the states, and there will be any number of others in the weeks and months ahead. And it's technical law that determines which would be the better or the best of the cases. But I'm satisfied that Colorado is one of those states whose case, when it eventually makes it to the Supreme Court of the United States, would be what we lawyers call a perfect case for the Supreme Court to grant cert on and to decide the question.
Let me ask you to help me navigate some of the things that get thrown around by skeptics.
You mean logical people?
People conflate the criminal process with the constitutional questions that I think you're raising. Can you clarify the differences?
Yes. It is not necessary in order for the former president to be disqualified or for any other person who comes within the ambit of Section 3 to be disqualified, that he or she have been convicted of an insurrection or rebellion. Nor is it necessary that the Congress of the United States have found that the former president or any other person have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States. That's what we call in constitutional law the self-executing character, if you will, of Section 3. It does not require a congressional finding, and it does not require criminal conviction. Those matters are completely separate.
So what all that matters is what your feelings?
from the eligibility for disqualification under Section 3. And another matter that I want to address today before we leave is this. I think that instinctively, Americans who think about the disqualification clause think that it is anti-democratic, and that is that the American people should decide whether the former president becomes the president of the United States again. That's an understandable concern.
Well, if you like our democracy, then yes, you should be. So you're telling me you're going to go against our democracy? I'm pretty sure that if you're on the left, that's like, they can't let that happen.
But it's not correct.
Oh, so it's not correct. Our democracy is not correct.
This reason. It's the Constitution itself that tells us that disqualification is not anti-democratic. Rather, it's the conduct that gives rise to disqualification under Section 3 that the Constitution says is anti-democratic.
And your point is it's the same as being 12, right?
But it's not, because there's qualifications for president, and here there's disqualifications for a senator, a representative, electors of the president and vice president, and then the list goes on to lower offices within the states and the state legislatures, and makes zero mention of the office of the presidency, which would be Article 2. Weird how it doesn't mention Article 2 in there, or the office of the presidency, because it doesn't apply.
You're 12, you can't be president either because you don't meet the age requirement. You're just saying it's letter of the Constitution renders the conduct a disqualifying factor.
That's correct. A president of the United States must be 35 years of age, and he must be a naturalized citizen of the United States, are qualifications for holding the office of the president. The qualification that he or she not have engaged in an insurrection or
It's not a qualification. It's a disqualification.
rebellion against the Constitution of the United States is a qualification, just like the other.
Just like age.
But it's not, because it's a disqualifier, dipshit. I mean, it's not that hard. This is so desperate. The Letitia James case, where they're saying that you can't have subjective real estate numbers and valuations, and when all parties agree to everything, and there's no bad business that was done, that's just as ludicrous as this is, as the documents case is, as the RICO case in Georgia. All of them. It's not sustainable. I keep going through that. I keep coming back to that word, unsustainable, because look how ridiculous this is on its face. On its face. And they put the stuff in front of these people's faces. They put up the Section 3 there, and if you actually read it and don't have TDS, you understand that it doesn't apply to the presidency. Then you also understand, well, they don't even have erection. And sorry, I did it. An insurrection. It's just insane. Thank you to Filter Dog 1 with the shades over there on the foxhole with the message. Good timing. Just finished iPod's POP6. So good. Yeah, he started posting to Foxhole again. So if you just last night, I believe, you can go check that out. It's IPOT. You guys know. One and the same. I think you also have Vanita71 with the cookie and Filter Dog 1 with the can with the message. So you pick and choose what part of the Constitution for your argument. How convenient. Well, that's what they do. They love the Constitution when they can, when it suits them, and they don't like it when it suits them. That's all based on feelings.
Because I think that it gets put in this trauma bucket, right? The country's so traumatized by Trump. They're afraid of
No, you've traumatized them.
using this document, this precious document that maybe the rest of us don't know as intimately as you do. It feels too easy, right? How could there be a document that perfect that it says if you've engaged in insurrection, you can't be president? But I I wonder if we're thinking about it all wrong, that it is as plain as being 12 or 13 years old and saying, well, of course you can't be president.
We are. The first thing I'd say, Nicole, is that this is not yours or my Constitution. It's the Constitution of the American people. And in that sense, the American people, through the framers of the Constitution, both the original Constitution, but also the 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868, those people were our representatives, if you will, the American people's representatives. It's they who determined in Section 3 that an individual who's engaged in an insurrection or rebellion, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States.
He doesn't take an oath to support it. It's to protect, defend.
And thereafter engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States should be disqualified from holding a high public office thereafter.
I want to bring Neil in on the law, but I want to ask you one more question about a story that we covered this week, and it was in John Carl's new book. He writes about Steve Bannon referring to the Trump movement as the Trump Davidians, and it brought me right back to your very harrowing live testimony before the January 6th Select Committee. What is the threat of Trump today?
Oh, really? Now he's a threat? Okay.
As I said before the Congress over a year and a half ago, Nicole, the former president and his allies were, as of January 6, 2021, a clear and present danger to American democracy. A year later, when I was asked, I think by Michael Schmidt of the New York Times, I said that today, 1 year after January 6th, that the former president and his allies were an even graver danger to American democracy than they were a year prior. And then most recently, I've also said that now, 2.5 years thence, that the former president is a clear and present danger and imminent danger to American democracy today.
In what way?
Wow. Neil Katyal.
So in what way because you guys said what he said. He said that at first it was just the senators and the Congress people and Trump. Then it was I don't know. That was like five hours ago when he first started this sentence. So then it was a year later. He said the same thing about certain other people's supporters. Then it was at the end. It was like just anybody, I guess, who supports Trump is now a clear and present danger to the United States of America. Not an open border, but Trump supporters.
Let's stay here. We'll wind our way back to the law. The times are so harrowing, but so sustained. And it is voices like both of yours that cut through. And I just wonder your thoughts on the fact that we have to have these conversations at all about Donald Trump.
Well, and also, Nicole, the fact we're having this conversation, have Judge Ludig talking about Donald Trump, that's like a antimatter explosion. I mean, Judge Ludig is a true national hero. And Donald Trump is now in court, I think by my count, right now this week, in 5 different jurisdictions as an insurrectionist. And, it's such a privilege to watch Judge Ludig and to hear him speak so clearly about what the Constitution means. And, it connects up very directly to this whole question of the 14th Amendment. The judge refers to the concern about it maybe being anti-democratic. The way I look at it is there's some red lines in the Constitution that say, look, you're not allowed to hold office if you do these things. You mentioned being 12, but the one that for me is the clearest is the natural-born citizen requirement. So like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Jennifer Granholm cannot be president even if 99% of Americans wanted them to be president, because that is a red line in the Constitution. And so, too, in 1868 was put in this other red line, you can't be an insurrectionist, asterisk. They actually said if the Congress votes to remove the disqualification and say you've paid your penance or whatever, then you can run. So there is actually here a democratic process the way there isn't for, say, the natural born citizenship clause. And I think the judge makes an absolutely compelling case for why the 14th Amendment, Section 3 should be in. And to hear Donald Trump talk about it, by the way, Donald Trump has not appeared in any of these courtrooms. That's who's not testifying. If this were you or me accused of being an insurrectionist, of course we'd be there to defend and clear our name. But this guy's afraid to be in court. Instead, he sends Kash Patel as his star witness, which can't be a good sign for him. But ultimately, I think that 14th Amendment Section 3 is really about this. It's about someone who is...
He's not in court because it's a bunch of bullshit.
It provided aid.
And he's in court other places for other bullshit.
In comfort to insurrectionists, been an insurrectionist in his own ways, and now that voters are saying this is a red line, you can't do it.
Will you testify in any of these?
Voters, are you kidding me? It's your political operators, and you know it. These aren't genuine voters.
State cases?
I would not expect to, Nicole, but as you know, I have the greatest respect for Neil Katyal, and as he was speaking there, it reminded me to say this, if I had the opportunity. The former president's lawyers are not arguing their case under Section 3. They are arguing that the former president did not engage in an insurrection or rebellion against the United States of America. That is a difficult case, but it's still a provable case. That's exactly what I want to say today.
Okay.
Focus on the distinction. Section 3 disqualifies one who has engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States. Now, that case can be made, as I've said publicly, by proving that Donald Trump had a plan and that he attempted to overturn the 2020 presidential election and remain.
That would only apply if he tried to do it by force. Now, you would have to say that he actually commanded and actually had people that were armed try to overtake the United States government. Not try to overturn the election. Overtake the United States government at his direction. You don't have that. You don't have anything close to that. What you have is a riot with agent provocateurs, a clear setup by lack of law enforcement. You don't have what you're looking for.
Remain in power in direct contradiction and violation of what's known as the executive vesting clause.
So now you have to bring something else into it, so that's not self-executing, is it?
The executive vesting clause is very simple. That's just the clause in the Constitution that prescribes the term for the President of the United States as being 4 years. Mm-hmm. And that clause says, by terms, that the President will serve a 4-year term and a 4-year term only unless he is elected or reelected to the office of president. So when Donald Trump tried to overturn the 2020 presidential election that he had lost fair and square.
Yeah, but how do we know that? You wouldn't let us look at it.
To then candidate and now President Joe Biden, he violated the executive vesting clause of the Constitution. That is what I have said is the quintessential insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States. And so
the refusal to leave office, the refusal to concede, and the refusal to carry out the tradition of a peaceful transfer of power is the damage, is the violation of the Constitution.
It is the rebellion against the Constitution of the United States. And so back to what the...
So now you're saying it's rebellion. So is it insurrection or is it rebellion? Or are you saying it's both? I'm not. I'm a little bit lost.
Former president's
Because he started talking about 2 days ago.
lawyers are arguing that they don't want to argue that. They want to argue instead that the former president didn't engage in an insurrection against the United States. They want to argue that he was not responsible for the riot on the United States Capitol. That's
They're going to play semantics and say, how is he supposed to know? Be there, be wild would make them
exactly.
But you're saying that's not what Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
So you're saying that the will there be there will be wild is literally the instruction manual for overthrowing the government? All right, you want to go with that? Please go with that. That's ridiculously stupid.
Says.
Exactly, and I've not followed closely these two cases, but I've followed them a little bit to the extent that I know that that's what they're arguing. I know that that's not the issue, and I've been concerned over this past week, frankly, that by the various courts' reactions to that argument. Namely, it's not been clear from the court's questions that the two courts that I'm talking about now in Colorado and in Minnesota have focused just yet on the actual issue.
Because you're saying they're taking the bait on questions and evidence about violence, and you're saying that the evidence, frankly, the evidence exists in emails that I think Trump is on the record in the congressional probe as having seen, where Eastman circulates the document and Trump is for it.
That's exactly right.
Yes, but again, objection to the certification of electoral college votes is not illegal and not against the Constitution.
Although I wouldn't have worded it the way you did.
Say many people, including our very esteemed guest here. Neil Katyal, are you as confident as Judge Ludig is that this ends up before the United States Supreme Court?
I think it does end up before the U.S. Supreme Court. I think that's the only thing that we can predict with some relative certainty. I don't think Minnesota or Colorado will have the last word on this either way. I do think that the hard thing for the Supreme Court is something we haven't talked about yet, which is not really the law. I think the judge makes an absolutely compelling case on the law. The hard question is the precedent that would be set if you allow one state or some voters in one state to remove someone from the ballot. That is, of course, I think what the text of the Constitution requires, but I do think it's going to give them pause. And, you know, some people are saying, look, if they do it to Trump, then other states, conservative states, will do it to Biden or to some future Democratic, nominee. My view on that is the Republicans are probably going to do that anyway, because that party is so lost its constitutional bearings that they'll just weaponize anything, whether it applies or not. Here, this is, as the judge says, the paradigmatic case for applying 14th Amendment Section 3. But you do have to worry that anything short of that paradigmatic case might be weaponized in some other instance.
This, Nicole, if I may, this will not be the ultimate issue. That is, the contemplation of the Constitution is that the processes that are underway right now across the several states will roll themselves up, whether those processes are in state court or federal court, eventually to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will decide whether the former president is disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And that will be a uniform rule for the United States of America. It will not be the case. It will not be the case that the former president is on some ballots and not on others. I can assure the American people of that.
Would you argue this case before the Supreme Court if asked?
Oh, please do it. They're going to be like, well, and when this guy finishes talking in 2 years, we're going to say, no, it's not a violation and not a disqualification.
I hope no one asked me to argue.
That wasn't a no.
I'm not an advocate, but I know very well someone who is one of the greatest advocates before the Supreme Court, and it happens to be Neil Katyal. So I would recommend that Neil argue it, as he did the most important case since our founding for American democracy, Moore versus Harper.
If asked, would you argue this case, Neil?
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Wow.
With the judge at my side.
I think you guys just made some news. Judge, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about these things, and thank you for explaining them to non-lawyers. I prepare by pulling out and Googling sections of the Constitution that I haven't read since school, so thank you very much for making me do that. It's important.
Thank you, Nicole. It's really an honor for me to be here with you.
It's an honor to have you here, and it's an honor to have the two of you together. Thank you both so much for starting us off. My heart is full of hope that we'll figure this out. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll figure it out.
History must be.
Let's see. Who's this? Is this the guy that's the round 'em up guy? Yep, there it is. Here's the round 'em up guy. Let's see if he says anything about what are we going to do with these people. Let's just see.
Quote, we still have more than 370 superbly qualified leaders who have seen their nominations unnecessarily stalled, he said. As we face a variety of urgent challenges, the most powerful fighting force in history must be at full strength. Joining me at the table, the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and host of the Independent Americans podcast, Paul Rykoff, is back. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you to Filter Dog One over there on the Foxhole with the cookie. The message is this a logic pretzel? It's an emotional logic pretzel. That there's no. It's very clear cut by the language that they don't refer to the president, and because if it referred to the president when they say that he's supposed to protect and defend the Constitution, it doesn't say that. It's supposed to support the Constitution, and that's not in his oath. It would be, I guess, the next step would be to see is support the Constitution. Let's just take a look. Here, I'll let this play for a second. Let me find something.
Happy Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a segment every week called This Week in Stupid, starring Senator Tommy Tuberville. I mean, every day he finds a new way to double down on stupid. I mean, he's ridiculous, he's radical, he's extreme. I think he's the most dangerous member of the Senate because of the extreme way he's pushing his culture war on the military, and he's just mucking up the works. I've been a football coach. I'm still a football coach. We have a playoff game next week.
There, that didn't take very long. Right here, for the oath of the senator, I do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, if we go to, let's see, section of the 14th Amendment. Let's see which one is the good one here. Let's see, Congress. Here, 14th Amendment. Right here, section 3. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president. And then down here, who, as an officer, has previously taken oath as a member of Congress or to support the Constitution of the United States. Right there. Support and defend the Constitution. Support and defend. Now here, oath of office. Come on. Office of the President of the United States. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution. This is the Vice President. Where is it at? Does he actually say support? Because there's people are saying. Here we go. Before he takes this, faithfully execute the office of the United States, and preserve and protect and defend the Constitution. So that's when this is. So there's the differentiation. So there is a difference.
And I've been a soldier. The two aren't even close. And to compare the two just is double down on the insulting nature of what he's doing. I've got 8-year-olds who know more about leadership and setting an example than Tommy Tuberville. And I think what's happening now is actually maybe a sign of some positivity, because we've been talking about.
I just have to ask, are they your children or what's going on?
Who's going to do something about this? Tommy Tuberville might be the one thing uniting Democrats and Republicans right now. Finally, the dam is broken. Dan Sullivan, Joni Ernst, Lindsey Graham is now even looking good compared to Tommy Tuberville. That's happening because they're uniting around one thing, and maybe that's a silver lining in this, that we can finally see some common ground for Republicans and Democrats to work together against extremists.
I hate when people say, why doesn't the military speak up? They do enough, right?
Yeah.
But who takes this case to the country?
I think we're doing it right now. I think Lloyd Austin's been doing the best he can. I think he's been picking his spots. I think he's a brilliant Secretary of Defense, and he's very, very smart in the way he approaches these political situations. 7 former Secretaries of Defense have spoken out. Admiral Mike Mullen, who I think is one of the finest leaders of our time, the former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has spoken out. Everybody's spoken out. But the key now that's moving the needle is moderate Republicans who are also veterans. All those folks I mentioned have served in uniform, and they're making a dent. And Tuberville's feeling the pressure. You want to see what a quarterback looks like under pressure? It's Tuberville. Being surrounded by the media, being surrounded by his colleagues. They got him against the ropes, and I think they just got to keep the pressure on, because right now we've got 2 aircraft carriers off the coast of the Middle East. We've got American drones operating over Gaza. We've got Beirut Marines at the embassy in Israel. We've got Marines on the ground
Marines
right there, and they don't have a commandant. They don't have a commandant, right? Because he had a heart attack, and this guy wants to compare being a football coach or being the commandant of the Marine Corps. It's adding insult to stupidity, but it's vintage Tommy Tuberville.
It's important to, I think, always level up, too. Just because Republicans are now in agreement, some of them, the ones you named, it's still not solved. I mean, he still controls this, and they still don't have a pathway to confirming all of the appointees. How does that logjam break?
With strategy. I think we've talked about this. There have been a lot of folks whining on cable news and in the Senate. What's the actual strategy? They're finally talking about changing the rules. Schumer's talking about that, and now it looks like he's got Republican support. This is about our national security. If we have to change the rules to respond to extremism in the military, we do it. Our politics has to be able to respond as well. So I think this is an example of a failure of imagination, a failure of strategy, and it's on Schumer, it's on McConnell, it's on the president, it's on all of them to find a strategy to neutralize this guy, because he's doing more to damage our national security.
Neutralize?
Than anybody else out there, with the exception of maybe Trump. Hamas loves seeing this. Putin loves seeing this, and every day.
Nope, here it is. Here's the devolution I was looking for. His argument was going to devolve into basically, it's still Trump's fault somehow. It's Putin's fault as well. And then he's going to, I'm assuming he's going to rope in Trump supporters somehow.
Our enemies are celebrating this extreme person. I've called Senator Redneck. I mean, this guy is so extreme. He's so out of touch. He wants to drag us back to the 1800s.
It was remarkable to see a Republican senator making the argument that our enemies love this, that everyone watching loves this.
Yeah.
You're going to stick around. We're going to shift gears. We'll head to the Middle East, where U.S.
Okay, I'll leave that one there. Let's see. Like I said, we're going to like I said, and let me try that again. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we're going to kind of split this into 2. So we'll do something a little bit later tonight, later this evening, most likely with Oberman. And so we'll do that. And but for now, we're just wanted to get through at least that Ludwig piece and just how ridiculous their argumentation is. So here's, I guess, another way that they're trying to push for this is by bringing on these officers, Capitol Police officers that have books to sell. And so let's see what kind of argument they're going to make here.
Next to discuss that and more, including if he's considering running for office. Stay with us.
Well, sure. Like he's controlled. He's already controlled. So having him run for office, you already got whatever you need on him.
January 6th insurrection left a stain on American democracy. We watched in shock and disbelief as an angry mob stormed the U.S. Capitol to try to overturn the 2020 election. Capitol Police.
Again, how can the people storming overturn the election?
Police, outnumbered and overwhelmed, faced a tidal wave of violence, including my next guest, who's become a steadfast voice in the fight for justice and accountability. In his new book, he provides a firsthand account of the trauma he continues to experience. Harry Dunn writes, quote, "I'm still struggling, still trying to get back to the man I was. I'm a lot better, but I came to realize that recovering from that day is going to be a long process." He also issues a sober warning saying, quote, "It was a frightening wake-up call that our democracy, this thing we hold so precious, can be taken from us if we don't protect it." Joining me now is the man who wrote those words, friend of the show, Officer Harry Dunn, author of Standing My Ground, a Capitol
I seriously doubt he wrote his own book.
Police Officers Fight for Accountability.
A lot of times they have people that they get paired with a writer, and that's like a ghostwriter, and they just basically ask them questions as an interview format, and then they kind of put things together.
And good trouble after January 6th. Officer Dunn, as always, thank you very much for coming to the show. House Speaker Johnson, who is one of the 147 Republicans who voted to overturn the election results and who has been dubbed the architect of the election denial lawsuits that happened in 2020, has referred to both of Donald Trump's impeachments as a sham. Your reaction to the speaker, who's now second in line to the presidency?
Good morning, Jonathan. Always a pleasure to be on with you. And yes, definitely a friend of the Saturday show. But with regards to the speaker's, his comments regarding the impeachments, the American people, I believe, ultimately, not necessarily the speaker or members of Congress, the American people, who I write the book for. The book is for the American people. I don't expect members of Congress, elected officials, governors, mayors to read my book, but it's for the American people and the people that hold them responsible. That's why it's so important. Like when I talked about losing democracy, democracy is that of the people. And I believe that if the people are educated, they make educated votes and they will do their parts to hold elected officials accountable so that the elected officials are reflective of what the American people are thinking. So my book is for the American people, not necessarily elected officials, and we need to exercise our vote.
Mm-hmm. Donald Trump at a rally on Thursday in Houston called the January 6th prisoners, quote, hostages. Your reaction to that, and how dangerous is it for Trump and others to continue to frame those who took part in the insurrection as
but that's not an insurrection.
Victims?
If they're hostages of his lies and of the MAGA party. The rhetoric that he spills, that's what people are, that's what this country is a hostage of. A lot of the things that he said is just completely lies, not based on any fact or anything. And people are taking it and running with it. And like I said, I think that goes back to where we are as a country and how, this next election cycle and where we are now, it's just been, we arrived at this place due to lies, stolen election. That's why people were there on January 6th. They thought the election was stolen.
Yeah. And what about that?
Despite the evidence showing that it wasn't. There
Really? What evidence? Can you provide some evidence that it was not?
was nothing that proved that it was.
Nothing that proved that anything was wrong whatsoever. Nothing.
And so if they're hostages of his lies. And I think we just need to get back to just honesty and
Really, we need to get back to honesty. Have we ever been in the place of honesty?
doing what the American people want.
Well, the American people want to put Trump back in office. I don't know if you've seen the polling.
Just yesterday, a former Trump political appointee at the State Department who assaulted a Capitol officer on January 6th was sentenced to 70 months in prison. And another January 6th rioter was sentenced to 85 months in prison for ripping off a gas mask of a Capitol police officer. Is this the type of accountability you were hoping for?
That was Officer Daniel Hodges and retired Sergeant Gunnell, who were the two officers who actually gave victim impact statements for those sentencing hearings. And yes, that is what accountability looks like.
Yes, murderers and rapists and people that have killed people, they get 4 and 5 years. They gave these people 6 and 7 years for participation in a riot. A lot of people that participated in riots in the summer of 2020, they didn't get anything. Nothing. Not even misdemeanors. So you can get the fuck out with this is what accountability looks like. Now, should these people have done that? No. But it's still quite... they just gave somebody 20 years for essentially keeping what? It was like I don't think it was an incest situation, which would be even worse, but with a like a rapist, just got 20 years for repeatedly holding someone hostage and impregnating them multiple times. 20 years. Joe Biggs, 17 years. Enrique Tarrio, 22 years. And Enrique Tarrio wasn't even there. Yeah, so get the fuck out.
Justice. I can't speak for those two individuals who were specifically, affected by those two men's actions. But also, those two men committed crimes against this country. And like I said in my book, and I talk about how the attack, January 6th just wasn't an attack on the individuals and the police officers who bear the brunt of that violence, but it was also on the American people in this country. Mm-hmm. So, it is important that these sentences reflect the severity of the crimes that they committed. So, like I said, I'm glad that I'm not in the Justice Department or, a judge that has to make those decisions to determine what is acceptable. But, it seems fair. But I'm not one to celebrate somebody being locked up.
Yeah, you are. You literally are.
It's sad, but it's what he got what he deserved.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to squeeze in two questions. We got less than 2 minutes. In your book, you point out that directly after January 6th, the media largely ignored the racial component to what happened on that day. Do you
what racial
still
component?
Feel that way?
When I talked about it, like it's the black police officers there and black people in this country in general just have a different walk that we have to navigate this life through. So it exists. I don't think that January 6th was about race, but there were racist people there. It's just plain and simple. So, like I said, I don't think that January 6th insurrection was about, a racial overthrowing of the government or whatever, but we can't deny the fact that that racial component still exists in this country.
Yeah, there were racist people there, one carrying a Confederate flag.
He was a registered Democrat. They can conveniently leave that one out.
Inside the U.S. Capitol. Last question, Officer Dunn. You recently posted on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, that at the moment you haven't given much formal thought to running for public office.
Okay, I don't care. Run for office all you want. Okay, leave that one there. All right, last little bit, I guess, are along this theme of extremism, which is preventing either people from, the reason why Trump shouldn't be running for office, right? That's the kind of theme, whether or not whether through the 14th Amendment or just in general, a morality clause. So we got about 20-30 minutes left that I have available for today, and then we'll do something a little later this evening. Probably, like 5, 6, or not. Maybe not 5. It's a little too early. Let's see. Later this afternoon. It won't, later this evening. So it won't be like our 4 or 5 p.m. It'll be a little later. We'll do some more stuff. That's the plan. All right. So here we go. Amid legal heat, revelations on MAGA. Oh, really? Okay.
Donald Trump is facing 2 felony cases related to January 6th. And yet, he's attempting to spin the Capitol riot for political gain on the campaign trail. At the start of a rally in Houston, Texas, last night, Trump took the stage to a version of the national anthem recorded by imprisoned January 6th rioters. He then had this to say.
Thank you very much. And you know what that was? That was, I call them the J6 hostages, not prisoners. I call them the hostages, what's happened. And it's a shame.
It is a twisted and ugly distortion because these are people who stormed the nation's capital and attacked law enforcement in an effort to steal an election.
Yes, but how can those people steal an election? You act like there's something that physical that they could go in and steal that would cause the election to go to Donald Trump. That's the sentence that you just tried to put on is absolute nonsense. The argumentation and the structure of what you just said is absolutely ridiculous. How can people storming a Capitol overturn an election.
Storm.
And what he's referring to is the fact that these people have been held in pre-trial detention and not afforded speedy trials. That's what he's referring to as far as the hostage part.
It is a twisted and ugly distortion because these are people who stormed the nation's capital and attacked law enforcement in an effort to steal an election. And they are now being held accountable for their crimes. But many say they were acting at the behest of Trump himself because they believed his lies.
You guys think she has... I don't think she has enough necklaces on.
And critics have argued that the Capitol riot made clear that MAGA is a cult filled with ardent zealots ready to act on its leaders' most outlandish claims. And new reporting indicates that some top Trump insiders view MAGA that way too. You might recall Donald Trump kicked off his 2024 campaign in Waco, Texas, which immediately raised alarms. Waco was the site of a standoff between the far-right cult, the Branch Davidians, and the FBI. The standoff ended in dozens of deaths. At the time of the rally, the Trump campaign insisted that the location had nothing to do with the Waco siege. But in a brand new book...
Yes, so because something that Bannon said months later, I don't even know how much later, jokingly, to a known propagandist in Jonathan Karl, who's the author of this book that she's showing right here, made a joke.
ABC's Jonathan Karl reveals that longtime Trump ally Steve Bannon was far less coy about these associations, calling MAGA followers, quote, Trump Davidians, and indeed saying it with, quote, a laugh.
Yes, that's what people call a joke.
Now, this is not your average critique of MAGA as a cult. This is Donald.
So here's the problem. They can't handle nuance, and he made a nuanced joke because of the whole Waco situation, or just the Waco, them trying to insinuate something about him being there in Waco. And that is someone that knows how to make a joke that goes over their heads, because all they hear is, oh my God, the extremist part of it. They just hear Trump Davidians, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're these extremists. And it's like, no, he was making a joke on you. You were the joke, because the way that you are going to respond to it, that's the nuanced part that they don't get. They just hear he called them Trump Davidians, therefore they must be a cult, and it's the exact same thing as these people that were there in Waco. They cannot. We looked at that video the other day. Was it yesterday? About perspective and being able to look outside of and pull yourself back from an interaction and say, okay, how is that responding? And that's the part of the nuances, I guess, that I describe as the inability for these people to have the nuances and be able to see it, is that they can't pull themselves back because they're still trapped in those first two levels of they hear something and they're still reacting emotionally, as opposed to understanding and zooming out and understanding, oh, he's making fun of the fact that it's Waco Davidians. There you go. You think they're a cult. He thinks that they're not. You ascribe them as this, and so he's basically making fun of you. So they don't have the ability to think in that way. They have no complex thought. It is what it is.
Donald Trump's 2016 campaign chief openly embracing the concept. That's a brand new and potentially toxic ingredient in the 2024 campaign. Joining me to discuss this now is Howard Dean, former head of the DNC.
I mean, you see how this works? Now because Bannon made a joke to one person who's writing a book, now, according to all of MSNBC land and henceforth, they are literally embracing it somehow and saying, yes, this is exactly who we are, and it's not a joke.
And former Vermont governor and former 2004 presidential candidate. As well with us is Court Bardello, former spokesperson for Republicans on the House Oversight Committee and now a Democratic strategist. So, Governor Dean, what is your response to Trump's embrace of the January 6th insurrectionists?
Well, I think Trump has always been a bit of a megalomaniac, and he's just getting further and further out there. This stuff is all going to come back during the campaign, and I can't imagine how it's going to do him any good. He does have a core group of cultists, but I don't think that's enough to win an election.
Yeah, he has a core group, but it's not enough to win an election. But have you seen the polls?
You know something? You know something? If you had told us 1 year ago that we were going to come in third in Iowa, we would have given anything for that. And you know something? You know something? Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. And we're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
So, Kurt, in a different lifetime, you worked closely with Steve Bannon at Breitbart. What's your take on Bannon's Trump Davidian comment? Is this just rhetoric, or is this the real thing?
It's 100% on brand. This is a guy who openly
He didn't answer the question.
boasted about his desire to effectively burn down our entire structure. This is a guy who calls himself a Leninist. So it's all par for the course. This is not surprising at all. Let's just be very clear here for a second. These people in jail, they're not hostages, they're terrorists. They're domestic terrorists. And the leader of the Republican Party, the person that's going to be the standard bearer for this party, believes that domestic terrorists are actually hostages. That's crazy.
Well, here's your problem. They're not actual domestic terrorists. They're rioters at best.
So this is a really important point, Governor Dean. When you were a presidential candidate, and I still remember when you had genuine supporters who really believed in your ideas and were absolutely emphatic about that. How does the energy that we saw in your campaign differ from the current MAGA movement, or indeed any of the energy that we traditionally see in strong campaigns?
Well, in my campaign and most campaigns that I know of, you don't have a candidate who's hallucinatory. I was able to bring most of the people in my campaign to John Kerry once he won the nomination, because clearly John Kerry was a better candidate than George W. Bush, whose administration had lied to get us into the Iraq War. What's going on now defies logic. Trump and many of his followers are not logical. They've embraced conspiracy theories for whatever psychological reason they find that necessary, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't tell you what that is. And it's a pretty frightening moment, but I find it hard to believe that 51% of Americans are willing to have a conspiracy theorist in the White House now that he has really shown his true colors.
So, Kurt, in an essay from that new book, Jonathan Karl writes, quote, Trump will continue to talk about what is at stake in the election in apocalyptic terms, the final battle, knowing how high the stakes are for him personally. He can win and retake the White House, or he can lose and go to prison. We've talked about this a lot tonight. In practical terms, given the stakes, losing or going to prison, what can we expect from the Trump campaign, and what might we expect from a Trump presidency?
Well, we have seen that they will do and say anything. They will do and say anything to cling on to power, to avoid being held accountable, including unleashing their deranged supporters on the rest of us. I mean, what's at stake right now is our entire democratic process. They didn't blink before trying to overthrow and overturn a free and fair election. They didn't hesitate to send their rabid supporters at the United States Capitol, targeting anybody that was walking by. I mean, there's a reason why Josh Hawley was running away from these people, his people, for crying out loud. There's a reason why they were saying, hang the vice president, their own vice president, the Republican vice president, Mike Pence. If they don't get their way this time, if they don't win, if they want to play this continuing conspiracy theory game, I'm very worried about what they're going to do, what they're going to say, because what we know about January 6th is that it wasn't just rhetoric. It wasn't just a normal tourist day. These people listen to what Donald Trump says and they act on it. They take it as marching orders. It's not just rhetoric and hyperbole. And that's a very, very dangerous situation when someone's about to try to use the presidency to avoid going to jail.
So, Governor Dean, with regard to that, I mean, this is someone who inspires this group of people, regardless of what the underlying truth of the matter is. And there are new signs that when Donald Trump tells his supporters that he's being legally persecuted in all of these different legal suits, that it actually benefits him, that his supporters respond to it well. Political reports that an anti-Trump group released 4 attack ads focusing on these 4 criminal cases. But the group's own data showed that the ads actually boosted his support among those Republicans who watch. What do you make of this? Is this simply a cult of personality, or is there something else going on?
Really? There's something else going on? The something else going on is all these cases are bullshit.
No, it is a cult of personality. Look, there are 2 kinds of Trump supporters, basically. One are the people who really have a serious problem with their
cognitive abilities,
willingness to get rid of reality in order to get whatever they think they need. And the others are people who really do want to change the country and are sort of feeling it at a loss. Those people are voters we can get. I thought it was brilliant for Joe Biden to go on the picket line in Michigan while Trump was at a non-union automobile factory. Because what's going to happen, first of all, that was a first for any president of the United States, and he took some heat from it. But a lot of people who vote for Trump are upset at corporate power, which is ironic because Trump has manipulated and stolen money from his people for years. Those people we can...
What?
Get and stolen money. Trump are upset at corporate power, which is ironic because Trump has manipulated and stolen money from his people for years.
He's manipulated and stolen money from people for years? What the fuck are you talking about?
Those people we can get. They're not deranged. They're angry. But that's not the same as being deranged and being hallucinatory about what Donald Trump is about.
So that's a really great segue, Governor, for Kurt. Kurt, let's talk about the Biden campaign. New reporting from the AP suggests that the Biden campaign has a new plan to re-energize the Biden coalition by making the election a referendum on Trump. That was the strategy in 2020. Will it be a winning strategy in 2024, or
no, because he doesn't have the economic record to do that.
Should they pivot to something else?
No, it will be a strategy, and it will work because...
No, it's going to work, guys.
Unlike the last election, this election, the likely Republican nominee, is going to be spending an inordinate amount of time campaigning from a courtroom, from a courthouse. 91 indictments he'll be fending off. This is not a normal campaign. And you and I both know that if any of those proceedings are broadcast on television, that will be must-see TV. That will saturate everything everywhere. It'll be the most watched thing since the OJ trial. And so making Trump the focal point, the center point of this effort, that makes all the sense in the world because the media is going to already be there anyway. I mean, what are we going to really expect the press to cover? Biden's economic agenda and successes?
Yeah, because he doesn't have any.
Or Donald Trump in a courtroom raising his hand, trying to avoid incriminating himself and committing perjury?
So, Governor Dean, do you agree with this? Given Joe Biden's low job approval numbers, does it make sense with Donald Trump in a courthouse for much of the rest of the year to focus on making this campaign a referendum against Donald Trump?
It's going to be a referendum because people are very well aware. I've had reasonably conservative business people who have run huge corporations come and talk to me about who we can get, to run and who, and they're going to support Joe Biden if it's down to them and Trump. I talked to them about Trump and we can't take a chance that he's going to win. He really is a danger to the country, and he's a danger to the pocketbooks of most of the people who are voting for him, which is ironic. Because, most of the deficits in this country have been caused by Republicans. That's just factual. George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump have run up the largest. They're really responsible for 100% of the deficit. People, I think a lot of people don't understand that. But eventually, one of the things I do agree with conservatives about, eventually the deficits are going to drive us into a really serious place. Nobody gives a damn. Trump doesn't give a damn. He gave a tax cut to his friends, his rich friends that are all down at Mar-a-Lago. He didn't do anything for the people who were voting for him. Sooner or later, that's going to...
I don't know about that. A lot of those rich friends have impacts within the economy for hiring and things of that nature, and for just the general positive trajectory in the economy. So they want to say that trickle down doesn't work, but when people that have lots of money and other corporations are able to move freely, it frees up things at the bottom, and the average experience in the aggregate is typically better on average.
They catch up with them, and it caught up with it in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Howard Dean and Kurt Bardella,
because of COVID.
Thank you so much for that insight.
Oh, so insightful. All right. Okay. Just to finish it out, let's go over and take a look at Robert Grueva did some coverage on this whole Colorado trial. I haven't seen I didn't get to see a part of this, so let's see what his recap looks like, and then we'll call it for today, or at least for this morning, and then we'll pick back up later this evening. So here we go. Let's see. We'll make sure we're all caught up. Thank you to Sean Joe over there on the Foxhole with the cookie. G Ross with the cookie as well. CK Whitehorse 180 with the cookie. Thank you guys for the support over there on Foxhole. Please do me a favor. Consider sharing out the links, hitting up the thumbs ups, the positive mentions on whatever platform you're on. And we will continue here.
In the Trump Colorado trial, we're going to hit the highlights. It was a lot of monotony, but there was some interesting things that happened, and so I want to walk us through it. We're first going to read through the highlights, and we heard from this guy basically all day. Okay, there was this person on the stand. His last name is Simi, S-I-M-I, and he was just going through slide after slide and walking us through how Trump is almost as far-right extremist, insurrectionist, blah, 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 right? But I want to just hit the highlights because we don't have all day to listen to Liz Cheney 2.0 here. So we're going to go back on Tuesday and just get our update from what happened from day one from some people over at the website CPR who are giving us some updates. And some of the big news on this day was that Trump's lawyers are going to be calling Texas congressmen, which might start as soon as day 3. So we'll see. Now, they say Trump and his team has not made the list of witnesses public yet. One did announce himself on Tuesday, and that's Congressman Troy Niels. Now, he said that he's honored to be called on to testify for this sham trial that's taking place in Colorado. And he knows firsthand that there was no insurrection. So Swalwell testified. Now Niels is coming in to testify for Trump. And this was underway today. And so some updates from the morning session, they broke it up into different segments. But Simi, the guy I just showed you, he spent the morning going over the specific tweets and interviews that Trump delivered, right? And he's making this compare and contrast that says Trump shares language with far-right extremists. And he said that far-right extremists, his long lecture, are galvanized and energized, and they were mobilized by Trump's call saying, "Be there, will be wild." He said that Trump framed the election as a stolen election, as an existential threat that needed to be fended off. And he said, quote, "The existential threat was to no longer have Donald Trump in power and having that taken away from them. But it was also more broad than that our country was on the verge of being taken away from us." He said this idea of theft and having things stolen is consistent with the broader worldview that far-right extremists tend to believe. So you can hear kind of what an annoying lecture this was. He said, "I've never seen anything in recent history like this." Simi said of Trump's language that he believes encouraged and inspired people to engage in violence. "I've never seen anything like this." We've got 24-minute videos, montages of Democrats saying the same things. Even Eric Swalwell, during his cross-examination, where he embarrassed himself by admitting his own tweets, said things like this. So Trump's attorney started their cross-examine just before lunch. We'll check in on it, opening with questions about whether any extremists who participated in his research over the years were involved in J6. He said, "Well, it's complicated, but I don't think any of them were." So the people that he was studying didn't do the thing. So Trump's attorney came into play, and he said yesterday that they're going to show that Trump and his side did not call for violence. He says nothing has ever asked for violence. Nothing has ever urged anything remotely close to an insurrection. Trump asked people to behave patriotically, peacefully. He said specifically, respect law enforcement. He said peace multiple times on January 6th, stuff that any politician or any president would be proud to say. And so that was the first session. We have a little bit more updates here. The afternoon session, we get into 1776 language. And we've made this joke here many times. It's like if you reference the year that you are an insurrectionist, a professor on a political extremism weighs in. So the professor Simi continued with cross-examination after lunch. Now there were some technical issues, and Gessler, the defense, Trump's team, couldn't find all the videos he wanted to play. Now he was able to play the clips when the hearing resumed. Yesterday he told members that he compressed the timeline of the case. It made it difficult for him to fully prepare. You know, the judge, and this is true by the way, the judge didn't give them any continuances or that I recall. And there were several motions to dismiss. There were several requests for a stay pending appeal. Judge denied it all. So Colorado's primary ballot must be certified by J5 2024. So the case has a hard deadline now. Like the ballot's going to be decided in January. So if this can't get up to the Supreme Court and back down, their ballots may already be done, which is probably part of the reason they picked Colorado. Okay, I think they picked Colorado for probably a number of reasons. One, because of the judge pool, and two, because of these rules. Like they know what judges are favorable judges and what locations, what district courts are favorable district courts for them. And so they found one in Colorado, and it's a good state. If they could take it off the board, that'd be a good thing for Trump or for the left. And they have a hard deadline, meaning that if the Supreme Court can't get an answer on this, it might be a done deal. So the day has been spent entirely with Simi on the stand, examining far-right extremist speech. So tedious. Now, he was asked about 1776. Is that coded language? He said, if I'm not part of the far right, I won't view the 1776 statement as a call to action. But if I am, I will learn that it's a coded call to violence. Simi answered, yes, you would, to the question. They went back over the speech that Trump made at the Ellipse. He said, quote, far-right extremists. For them, there would be a clear understanding that fighting is the real message, not being peaceful. And so Judge Wallace broke in. She said, sir, is it your testimony that if you had watched that speech and nothing had happened, that you would have the same view? I mean, I guess that worries me with all this kind of stuff. It's all kind of, 2020 hindsight, said the judge. Now, Simi said his interpretation of the speech is independent of what happened at the Capitol in the following hours. He said, no, it's not related to that. Trump's speech alone is what was a fight indicator. I was already concerned, he said, certainly, about the precursors to J6 and that speech in real time, given the emphasis on fighting, even though Eric Swalwell the day before used the same testimony in his X posts. That would have given me very, very substantial concern that violence would soon be to follow. And then we get the last witness on the stand of the day is this guy. Now, this guy is named Banks, and he is somebody who I think is a national security law professor, works as a constitutional law professor, neat, at Syracuse University College of Law, also the founding director of the Institute for Counterterrorism. He said that Trump had plenty of authority to respond on January 6th. He said, I believe around 1:34 p.m., the mayor of Washington, D.C. and the chief of police asked for more support. So there were at least 2 calls before 2 p.m. that should have alerted the president what he was already seeing on TV, that there was an attack on the Capitol. And we know that Stephen Sund, the former Capitol Hill chief of police who was fired after this, says that he made many phone calls to his counterparts at the Capitol to try to get this resolved. But Nancy Pelosi and the House Sergeant at Arms rejected him from doing anything that would have helped to combat some of this. So Banks noted, and by the way, there were at least, in my opinion, 50 undercover CHSs that were there that were informing on all of this. And the FBI was well aware, as was Homeland Security, about this. And there was no response that was put in place, according, not to me, to Stephen Sund, that was sufficient based on his warnings that he was trying to parlay up the chain. So Banks noted that in the summer of 2020, Trump deployed the National Guard after George Floyd. Oh, but he didn't do it this time. Banks said that Trump should have acted swiftly. He should respond to his constitutional responsibilities when there's an assault on the democratic process. He also said Trump should have declared a state of emergency, like other presidents have done. Now, the last witness testimony was relatively short. Court adjourned pretty early, 3:38. She said, for all you young kids out there, Judge Wallace, I'm sure you'll be happy to hear we're gonna go into recess. Now, of course, it's Halloween. So, for you with young kids, they're going out. It's Halloween. They're going trick-or-treating. They're putting their masks on. The hearing comes back tomorrow at the following time, 8 a.m. Now, I want to give you some highlights on this, okay? This is part 1 of the hearing. Day 2, part 1. Now, I'm going to spare us all this pain and suffering, but this is Simi, okay? Now, he's testifying. You can see some of his slides. Here's one of them. It says here, Donald Trump, decade of ingratiation with far-right extremists. Well before 2021, Donald Trump echoed and embraced far-right extremist messages. This is one of his initial statements and most popular statements, that Mexico is not sending their best. We remember how that reverberated around. Everybody said racist, racist, racist. Same stories here, right? Stop the steal. Influence among far-right extremists. He's just making the case that Trump is a part of some sort of extremist group. He's got X posts. He's got Alex Jones, I think, made a cameo. Extremist or responding to the call to be wild. It's like a Liz Cheney book report PowerPoint presentation, and they were just probably very much enjoying themselves all day. So we're not going to be a part of that. Now, same thing happened in part 2. Right? Fast forward through all that garbage. This guy's back on the stand like, oh gosh, again? How much more do you have to say about this? So now he talks about a unified attack. I'm sure he didn't talk about the FBI being involved. He talks about the noose. He talks about a bunch of other stuff. Gets a water bottle put in front of him, and now he's analyzing Trump's speech. And so he says here what he says, and we'll fast forward through that as well. Now they take their lunch break. We come back. We're here in day 2. Let's check in and see what some cross-examination might look like from Trump's defense after they come back from the lunch break. We'll listen to a little bit of this and see how it sounds.
So, Dr. Simi, I'm going to start with some exhibits here. I'm going to talk about intentionality and interpretation. So let's bring up 1074. So can we play just for the first 5 speakers on this video, please?
Oh.
Our job is to fight. We are going to fight. We are going to fight. We are going to fight. Democrats are fighting as hard as we can. standing up to the fight.
So you heard a number of speakers use the term fight, correct?
That's correct.
And I'd represent to you that those are leading members of the Democrat Party and office holders. Are you able to tell from their speech whether or not they're intending to provide a message to the members of the far right-wing extremists?
If I may explain my answer.
Let's just start off on small bits, and then I'll certainly give you a chance. So from what they're saying, so using the word fight, are you able to tell if they're intending to speak with far right extremists?
No, absolutely not.
And it'd be fair to say that you can infer that they're not intending to speak with far right extremists because they tend towards a different side of the political spectrum. Would that be fair to say?
I wouldn't necessarily want to make that kind of inference on limited information, but I understand your characterization.
Can you tell from what they're saying whether or not the members of the far right-wing extremists would view that as a communication to them?
10-second clips? Absolutely not.
You'd need more context, correct?
More information, more context.
And what is some of that more information you'd need?
You want to look at past communication patterns. You want to understand the historical context between the speaker and whatever community or culture you're trying to understand whether they have a relationship with. You'd want information from that culture's perspective. In our case, right-wing extremists and how they receive messages, and in particular as it relates to that specific person. So there's a number of different types of information you want.
Were those comments responsible for Antifa and the riots during the Summer of Love?
Okay. Let's play a little bit more. I'm guessing your answers are going to be the same, but we're going to go through this.
You need more context? Here, I got some more video for you.
Democrats are going to fight like hell. We fight like hell. I will fight like hell.
You need some more?
Did you answer the same for those five?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let's just finish the clip, and
yeah, just
I'll
play
ask
the
you
rest
a few
of
more
it.
questions at the end of this clip.
Yeah, just play the next minute. Good.
I'm going to fight like hell. I'm right now. Fight like hell. We have to fight like hell. I know many of the senators and members of the House will fight like hell. We are going to fight like hell. We're going to fight like hell. Fight like hell. And we just have to fight. We're going to fight. We are going to fight. We're going to fight. We're going to fight. Because you will fight. To fight. Political revolution. That means that millions have got to stand up and fight. And fight and fight. Stand up and fight back. To fight and continue to fight.
Yeah, I wonder if Antifa is taking their marching orders from the Democrats.
We'll also fight him and challenge him in every way that we can. Fight in Congress, fight in the courts, fight in the streets. In the Congress, in the courts, and in the streets. There's the fight, there's the fight, there's the fight, and then there's the fight to defend. What are you going to take on this fight? The American people.
Do you need more context? There are longer videos of this, by the way. They're up to like 20 minutes now. 23 minutes, 24 minutes, I think I found one. The RNC just keeps releasing longer and longer videos. I don't know, once a month, they just find more.
This is going to be a fight. We all must fight. We're in the fight of our lives.
Fight of our lives?
This is the fight of our lives. The fight of their lives. We are in this fight for our lives. We cannot ever give up fighting.
Okay. You heard a few speakers in there say, we're going to take the fight to the streets. Do you remember hearing that among some of the speakers? Two of them, I believe, said that?
Yeah.
Okay, I trust your characterization.
You don't want me to play that whole thing again, do you?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
Yeah, of course not.
So there's a couple of speakers that said, we're going to take the fight to the streets. If they were at a rally with far right-wing extremists in it, and they used the term fight, and we're going to take the fight to the streets, would those far right-wing extremists interpret that as a call to violence?
They had a relationship with the speaker that involved a history of that speaker promoting and endorsing violence. Before and after violent incidents occurred, had developed a relationship, signaling various things that were important to that community, that culture, signaling things in terms of their support for various grievances, using language representing threats as existential in nature, and requiring violent action. If all of those things were present, then yeah, quite possibly they would interpret it in that fashion.
So what does that mean for the people on the left that heard that? Because they are the ones that have developed that relationship with that speaker, the same way you're insinuating that Donald Trump had some sort of relationship with the people in his audience through what you said, like a known pattern. So what you're saying is that I like the argumentation here, because I understand what this guy is trying to say. This guy is trying to say, well, they wouldn't interpret that way, only if Trump says it. Well, that's the whole point, which the attorney for Trump has gotten him to say, is that it doesn't apply anywhere else except for Trump. Meaning that, okay, well, how is that so unique to Trump supporters in your argumentation, but not to other people?
Okay. And if those things weren't present, it's unlikely they would interpret those terms, fight and take the fight to the streets, as a call to violence, correct?
It's always hard to predict, take something out of the equation. Again, if you're just saying in isolation one thing, and if that one thing's not present, then yeah, that would make sense that it would have a substantial influence in terms of a lack of action that might not be taken.
Okay. So let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say there's a speaker, say one of those speakers in there that says, we're going to fight like hell and we're going to take the fight to the streets. That's what they say. And they say that at a big rally, and that rally has far-right extremists in it. But they don't have a history of promoting violence, at least none that the right-wing speakers know of. And they don't have any perceived relationship with the far-right-wing extremists. So they don't have those two factors. Would that be considered a call to violence?
What are the other contextual factors present? And that would make a big difference too. So again, some of these hypotheticals when they're...
All right, so we'll leave it there. Now they're going to go back and forth to try to define what the terms are, and he's trying to zoom in. Okay, this guy's trying to bundle everything together, and the defense attorney is trying to unbundle to say, okay, what are the things that you are saying are leading to insurrection? Because I'm going to disprove all of those elements of the insurrection, because those are just the things that politicians do. It's the things that Democrats do. So he is one of the witnesses who testified today. We heard the other guy was saying Trump should have done some other things, but the trial will carry forward. And we do know that tomorrow, the next day, we expect to hear expert testimony also on constitutional law and on the 14th Amendment. So some more experts to come in and unpack that. It'll also be the first chance to hear expert testimony from the defense. So Trump's defense should be there. We'll see what experts they bring out. We also do know that Troy Nehls is going to be speaking at some point. He has confirmed that for us on Twitter. And so we're going to continue to follow this insane Trump removal trial as they try to cheat and take the choice away from us on who we can vote for, specifically in Colorado. But this will just be the first domino. It will trickle down and other courts will pick up on it. So my friends, we'll be here continuing to cover. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.
All right. So I think that sufficiently covers the topic. Okay, well, that'll be it for at least for right now. We'll do something, like I said, later this evening. And we'll hope to see you then. If not, catch it on the replay. Thank you to Filter Dog over there on the Foxhole for the shades, the can, the cookies, and all that. And thank you Thong Chaser for the cookie. Thank you G Ross again, Sean Joe, CK Right Horse, and Benita 71. I appreciate the support, guys. We will reconvene, as I said. Have a great rest of your afternoon or morning in some cases, and we'll catch you soon. As soon as I have a good idea, I'll put a post out on Twitter of an approximate time that I will shoot for. I'll know that early afternoon. I'll know, so we'll figure something out.